Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. On this channel, we're going to be discussing all things moving to the land and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. So let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of The Ultimate Farm Wife. We have Emma here in the studio on the farm today, and we're going to be talking about her moving from the city and her corporate life into rural life and what she is doing with rural women on the land to help take some of the pressure off the mental load using AI. Now, because this is a farming podcast, I do want to say this is not artificial insemination. We are talking about artificial intelligence. Emma, thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself, your family, and your new location.
Thank you for having me. I'm Emma Spartalis. I'm from Clarencetown, which is a little country town in the Dungog Shire region. I live here with my husband and two little kids. So I've got a 4-year-old daughter and an almost 2-year-old son. And yeah, we've been living in the country now for, it'd have to be probably at least 6 or 7 years. And prior to that, we lived in a little bit closer to Newcastle. So like very much residential, like urban living. And yeah, prior to that though, so when I was growing up, I grew up in Dungog Shire. So that's kind of why, a big part of why we ended up moving back out here. I've got some childhood roots there.
Absolutely. And let's go back to childhood. So tell us about growing up. And then, did you always want to get out? Did you always want to head to the city and do something in corporate?
So childhood-wise, growing up in Dungog, and then Mum moved us into Maitland, which at the time I loved, but growing up in Dungog was just a really, really, I want to say out of my entire childhood, probably like one of, the most pleasant, formative, peaceful times of my life. Like it was just a really typical small country town. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone's parents are looking after everyone's kids. I spent most of my life when we were living there outside on bikes, swimming in the river, and just to and fro between friends' places. So it was really, really nice. And then Mum moved us into town, which I thought at the time I really loved because the social, I had a lot more kids to be playing with, and yeah, I thought it was great at the time, but it wasn't until I got into work and I left school in year 10. So I thought, school wasn't for me. I really didn't do well on the school front. I really loved school, but just was not a good test taker and was told many a times because of that, it just, not necessarily that wouldn't amount to nothing, but just wasn't good on that front.
I always find that's really interesting when teachers in school says that, because I was the same. Like they were like, she's never going to amount to anything academically. And since then, I've done my bachelor's and I've run businesses and written books. And yeah, it's always amazing that they make that judgment on such young, impressionable kids.
Yes, especially when, I really actually did genuinely enjoy the subjects that I was learning, but not necessarily just good with test taking. And so I really struggled with that. And because of that, I was thinking, what's the point in staying to do a HSC? I'm never going to uni. I'm never going to be anything. I basically should just get out and start working. So yeah, I did that. I picked up some admin work, got into sales, moved from sales into marketing, realizing that I could be a little bit more strategic and help salespeople to sell better. And then realized when I picked up a marketing job that the only part of marketing that I really loved was the analytics side of marketing, actually looking at a campaign brief and going like, does this actually make sense to run? And, where should we sell this product and why? And, testing some of those things. And I realized I really didn't love the fluffy side of marketing, like the, talking to marketing consultants about the artwork and, building campaign briefs for days. So I was like, get me into the data. And that's probably what spurred me into the corporate world and also into the data digital side of my work. And lo and behold, I ended up then in my adult life with a whole lot of work experience behind me at that point, being encouraged as an adult to go to uni and get a degree, which I did because I was kind of going, well, if I want to progress in my corporate career and I want to, stand shoulder to shoulder with all of these other really experienced and, people who've got degrees for days, I probably need to do that. So I started a marketing degree and then I ended up doing my MBA through Newcastle Uni, even though I was encouraged to do a Masters of Data Science, given that was the field of work that I was really pushing into. I really wanted to be more of a business generalist as opposed to specialist. Yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in the corporate space, just following what I love doing. So talking with people, helping to connect the dots and helping to rationalize whether something actually makes sense to do or not. Differentiating a genuinely good business idea from just a good idea. And working in a male-dominated industry, there was a lot of people at the time who were not very good with using data. So I found some personal strength there too, being able to come into a room where I was typically the only woman and say, this is what we should be doing, where we should be doing it, why we should be doing it, and here's the data to back that up. It gave me some confidence and strength behind my recommendations in a room full of, very big personalities and big opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let us know a little bit more about the corporate side you found yourself in and the day-to-day feel of what that was like. And then what made you decide, no, I'm finished in the corporate world. I'm heading back country and I'm going to stop working with corporates and I'm going to do what you are doing now.
There's a few pinch me moments in there where I've got, there's part of me that goes, who am I to even be telling this story? Because I, somewhere in my head and heart, still go, I'm still that girl in year 10 who was pretty much, going to be none of these things that I'm about to say I've been doing. But I got really good anyway with using data to tell stories and to validate business cases for things. I was then employed by the CFO of WesTrac, which is a Caterpillar dealer. They're $1 billion national brand. At the time, they weren't. They're at that point now, but the business is growing, and the CFO really took a leap of faith with me because I didn't have the degree at the time. I didn't have the analytics background, but I had a hell of a lot of passion and drive and some recent examples of being able to use data very well for the business. So yeah, I stepped into a business analyst role, and then I was finding myself in the room quite often with the company's executive team and putting up dashboards in front of them to basically show them what was working, what needed some tweaks and where there might have been some commercial risks. The executive really appreciated that, and, fast forward again a little bit, I had people put under me to go, Emma, you're doing really well with that. Here's a few people. Can you go and basically show them how to keep doing what you're doing in the way you do? And then again, fast forward a few more years, and I was probably in the peak of my corporate career. I was effectively the head of digital for WesTrac, so in both states, in New South Wales and Western Australia, and I was using all of WesTrac's data across their entire business operations. So I guess at that point in my career, I was accountable for platforms that were generating in the high hundreds of millions in revenue. I automated almost $83 million in annual sales processing. And by this point, I had a pretty substantial sized team or teams that I was managing. And I found a lot of my time was spent in coaching and mentoring team members and really encouraging them to use their digital skills for a greater societal good wherever possible. Also seeing over the horizon that digital and technology was about to play a huge part in all of our lives, and that I happened to be managing a team of some of the most highly skilled people I'd ever worked with, and that I just felt a bit of a duty of care there in making sure that we were creating digital solutions for the business that were good for the business, but also using some of those skills in ways that was, meaningful to society. And I was secretly looking for more of that myself. So really I'm accumulating a fairly significant amount of skills and experience in digital, with machine learning, with robotics, with automation, AI, and all that sort of stuff. And I went, how am I using any of this out in the real world? So I started looking for ways of doing that. And I then I went through IVF for both of our children. So it was a bit of a tough slog with that. I was dosed up pretty heavily most days on IVF drugs, which a lot of your listeners, I think, would probably, either have experiences with themselves or be knowing what I'm talking about purely on the, in the genetics side of the cattle industry as well, which I've come to learn there's a lot of similarities there between. But yeah, I was for a solid year there doing 4 cycles of IVF while I was also at the peak point in my corporate career. So just finding a lot of challenges balancing the needs of a huge growing business and also the needs of me as a whole woman trying to start a family. And I just found it really hard. So after our second baby, I just went, I really need to get clear on showing up in the world in ways that I'm going to be able to look my children in the eye one day and say I was on the right side of using digital and AI for a greater good, and not dismissing some of the stuff that I was seeing in terms of really unethical ways that AI was being used. And I could see, we were managing it within a corporate business with millions of dollars worth of resource behind it to do a good job of that sort of thing, but then out for most small to medium-sized businesses going, they don't have $1 million in resource to play with digital, to make mistakes and to learn from them. So, 2 babies in, I went, I need to get out into the wild and start using these skills for some greater good.
Emma, that brings us to the start of your business as it is now. So tell us about your business and then about being part of the AgriFutures Rural Women Awards, which is where, our paths crossed this year. So start with the business and then talk into where we met earlier this year.
Yeah, so the moment there where I quit my corporate job and started my business, I was pretty much told by everyone in the corporate world I was mad. Why? Why would you leave a good thing to go and help all these rural people? Because there's a serious disconnect there in the corporate world, I think, between their understanding of rural Australia being the absolute backbone of our country that it is. And there was a lot of doubt there too that I would have any chance sinking my teeth into the rural or agricultural market, given that my corporate history was in mining and construction. So I went, well, I live in the country, I love the country lifestyle, these are my people, and I want to work more with women who are running their own businesses. I think when I was in my corporate career, I softened a lot of the raging feminist that's in there, just to, avoid making other people feel uncomfortable. But I think stepping into my own business was also a bit of stepping into me and being an unapologetic feminist. I'm not raging. I'm generally a really happy person. But it's the happiest I've been was actually just stepping more into helping women use digital. And I went, I'm going to put myself out there in the rural industry, and I put a message out there in my local community group just to say, like, is there anyone that would just like to meet up with me for a coffee and talk about their business? And, in my head I went, I'll learn as I, hear conversations being had and hear what the realities are for people, particularly women running small to medium-sized businesses. I'll hear their challenges and I'll learn from that. And for all the things that people said I can't do because of my, previous focus, I genuinely believe that digital's for everyone. So I just went, it's only going to be a matter of time before I start looking at ways of using digital to solve problems for women running small businesses. I got in the first 24 hours, I had like 80 messages back from that invite for a coffee. And I went, wow, like, this is Dungog Shire. Like, if anyone knows Dungog, like, Dungog's a little country, it's lots of beautiful rolling hills, but you don't really see that many people. And I certainly did not think that there was 80 women in my little neck of the woods running businesses. And that 80 turned into 150 within 3 months of women looking to connect, feeling isolated, feeling like they were the only ones in the thick of it, wanting to meet with other women and feel seen, I think. And then I was like, how am I going to find a cafe around here big enough to fit all of us? And that's how, I guess, the connections started, was just a genuine openness to meeting, hearing, listening, learning, and just making like a sponge, really, and just trying to understand first, which I did. And the more women I started meeting with, the more challenges I was hearing. And, there was definitely some times where I was sitting there having my coffee going, come on, girls, like, we can use digital and AI to solve for so many of these things that were, for them, a huge part of their world. Like, in particular, like on the admin side of running their businesses, just absolutely drowning in admin work while also trying to show up in the community, trying to show up for their children, wearing 12 to 15 different hats and running normally not just one business. And this was another realization I had that's quite different in the corporate world. When you're talking with people running larger businesses, there's usually only one business. In rural, people have got, normally 2 or 3 different businesses on the go at any one point in time. And I was like, whew, these women have multiple businesses. They've got family that they're trying to show up, meaningfully for. They've got a community that they're trying to show up meaningfully for. And they still think they're not doing enough. And I think just there was something that truly healing about bringing these women together. I noticed every single time they met, I'd have one of these women pull me aside after in tears saying thank you for just having this space. And I was like, oh my God, I did absolutely nothing outside of just be the person who said, okay, we'll meet here. And they all come together, talked about what they're doing, shared some experiences, shared some challenges, and left feeling a bit lighter and a little bit more connected. But it was that was, I guess, a few of those moments where I was like, I need to keep this going for them, because it's about so much more than business. And about my initial thinking was that I'd be able to help them from an efficiency standpoint, reduce a bit of the mental load. But for some women, they hadn't actually spoken about their world really to anyone. So it was just that opportunity that I didn't realise how meaningful and how healing that is in itself. So yeah, that's where I got started. I ended up, while I was listening to their challenges, ended up building 12 AI agents to help with the administrative burden of running their business or businesses. And also because I was really noticing like fairly significant amount of burnout across nearly every woman I was meeting. Developed 4 of those that were geared a little bit more into the wellbeing space and to help with mental load. Literally just give these women an agent that they could brain dump into and have all of the things that were taking up space and just making her feel overwhelmed and organise that. That's what got me into and nominated for the Rural Women's Award. And I was keen to participate in that, really to put a spotlight on the wellbeing side of using AI for the benefit of rural people's well-being. Knowing too that the women are, and this is from all the stories too that I was hearing, and those realizations going, these women are the backbone not just of their businesses but of the entire community. If anything was to happen to any of these women, everything suffers for everyone. And there's a lot of focus on, and rightly so, a lot of focus on men's well-being in the rural and in the farming space. And there's a huge opportunity there for us to be using digital and AI to reduce the mental load of the women, who are then able to contribute differently in their own businesses and in their own farming operations, which has a direct impact to the partner in that scenario as well. So yeah, that's how I got into that space.
Emma, for those who are listening and they're like, yes, I need to reduce my mental load. Yes, I need to automate. Yes, I need to learn more about AI, and I need a starting platform like the platform you've set up. You can also speak to women from across the nation with the way that technology is set up these days. Where are they going to find you, and how are they going to start this process?
They can find me digitally everywhere. So I'm on Instagram, just Spartalis Consulting, and on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me on a professional network. The website, so spartalisconsulting.com.au. You can have a look at some of the options for getting started. And that's also just from a point of feedback. I found a lot of women, and I'm saying women a lot, but it's really, business people in general in the entrepreneurial and small business space, we're really struggling with just where to even start. So I created a free little AI for your business audit. So you can it's a self test. It only takes 3 minutes, and you literally just answer honestly where you're at with digital, and it tells you both where you're at from a digital maturity point of view, but also the next steps to take for getting started. And that might, as it was with you, that might look like setting up an AI brain. That's where everything about your business, the farms, everything that feels complex but we make not complex is downloaded into what we call the AI brain, and any AI that you use plugs into that and learns all of the context about you and your business from it, so that you never need to explain yourself, anything about your world. You never need to explain it more than once. And every new thing that you realise as you're going along that you haven't added yet, you add it in, and it's one less thing that you ever need to say again. That in itself, just from a mental load point of view, is a huge saviour, because a lot of people, the way they use AI today, and a lot of them just don't know better, but they might jump onto ChatGPT and start a chat, and then that's it, they leave it, and then they'll come back the next day and start another one, and they're left going, like, they're wanting to if AI was a person, they would want to strangle it, going like, I've just told you all of that, all about me, and now I'm saying it all over again, and it's very frustrating. And it's basically just got to do with because they haven't set up a central piece of information that sits separately that they can just plug into and never need to say anything. just get on with automating or, starting to work through the jobs that need doing. And a lot of the simple ones that I find people find immediate relief with is looking at their marketing for their business, like the stuff that they find they know they want to do more of and want to do more consistently, but just struggle with, where do I start with AI, and where do I start with taking a job that I hate but I know I need to do and turning that into a thing that they not only have automated, but it gives them that headspace to think about, how do I do this in a way that I actually enjoy and I show up more authentically, because I don't have to think about any of the planning side of it. The AI helps me with all the planning side of it. I've got newfound bandwidth and capacity for thinking about how you actually want to show up in the world. So there's a bit of that. There's the marketing stuff, there's the admin stuff, like invoicing, finance, like all of these jobs that are just on repeat and take up space in our heads that is perfect. It's a perfect for. So hopefully there's a few little ideas there for getting started, but connect with me. And this is also why a big part of why I stepped out of my corporate role was to connect with more like-minded women who are just needing a bit of hand holding on where to get started. Connect with me and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Emma, if anyone else is listening to this and they are also dealing with the challenges of moving, from the city or from a corporate career, and they've gone back to the country, they've gone back to connecting with women, do you have any advice for them?
My advice on the work front is always to follow your heart. So I was told that I needed to move to a major city, like even more so from Newcastle, I'd have to move to Sydney or Brisbane, Melbourne, wherever, to actually pursue a corporate career in digital. And I went, this flies in the face of everything I know to be true of digital's capability. As long as I've got Wi-Fi, we can be talking from anywhere. We can be doing work from anywhere. So lean in, use digital to your advantage. That's the world we're living in right now. And if a lot of what you do in your corporate job can be done digitally, like if you find you're in, Zoom meetings and all that kind of stuff, and you want to live rurally, you absolutely can. And should, like if that's where you really want to live. I just think if you've got Wi-Fi, and a lot of places, even quite remote, have managed to get the internet hooked up and available, even thanks to Starlink. Now, I'm not quite sure at your place there if you've got Starlink, but I would say definitely follow your heart and live where you want to live and do the work that you love the most.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. A huge thank you goes out to our show editor, Krista Pathrath, CEO of the Rural Podcasting Network, helping rural entrepreneurs share their voice online. You can learn more about Krista and the Rural Podcasting Co. at their website in the show notes below. And to our creative powerhouse, Dakota Gorey, CEO, or as she likes to call it, the Creative Experience Officer of CGC Design. With over 5 years of experience in marketing, social media management, and website design, Dakota is passionate about helping businesses and brands of all sizes find their voice and stand out online. Want to know more about her work or about Krista and how you can get involved? Make sure you're using the links in the show notes below. I'm Katja Williams, and this has been the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. Until next time, take care, be kind, and keep showing up for your farm, your family, and yourself. I'll see you in another episode. Before you go, if you've been loving these farm life chats, I'd love for you to join me over on my other podcast too. It's called Absolutely Fabulous, where we dive into agriculture beyond the headlines and bridging the urban-rural divide. We'll deep dive into big conversations in ag, from the challenges to the highlights and what's shaping our future. It's a space where honest stories, laughter, and a good dose of farm life real talk goes on. So make sure to head to the link in the show notes, subscribe to the Absolutely Fabulous, and I'll play the intro for you now.
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people, and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are absolutely fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode.